Counsel with us, another attorney. That makes three for the night. The Hat Trick Public Interest Legal Foundation, and he, as I said, the president of that. He's an author. He has represented multiple presidential campaigns and election litigation, and was selected by the president, President Trump, to sit on the now defunct Fraud Voter Commission. And I do want to get into one last thing as it relates to the voters, perhaps those who are not registered to vote or non-voters who are voting. Non-citizens. I see in the Post-Gazette here just the other day, state review of voter registrations narrows list of potentially ineligible voters to 9,000. And this has, I have to tell you, when I was getting ready to do radio one day and I saw that and I thought to myself, I could probably do something with it, but I never knew I was going to see you a week later.
Right.
I don't know what detail you want to get into with respect to this, but aren't we talking about generally the same thing here?
Yeah, this is the that we've been asking for this data for months from Harrisburg, from the Secretary of State. They're more interested in leaking it in dribbles and drabs to the Post-Gazette than they are into complying with federal law and giving it to us.
Does that make it a little bit more controllable in some regards?
Of course it does. Mr. I think it's Ralph, is his name at the Post-Gazette, is writing more favorable articles for the government. He's sort of the government mouthpiece about this PennDOT screw-up. And, you know, it's funny, the headline, when you show that to regular Americans, there's only 9,800 aliens on the rolls in Pennsylvania, where they, the writer of the Post-Gazette and the government in Harrisburg thinks it's only 9,800. Most people go nuts when they hear that.
Yeah, right.
It's only 9,000. What if we were taking 9,000 people off the rolls illegally, the hue and cry?
Let me ask you this. As it relates to the question of giving it to one media source as opposed, why not give it to you guys? What's the hang-up?
That's a good question. I hope that the Pennsylvania Secretary of State watches this show. I'll promote it on Twitter once the link's up.
Good.
I hope that the lawyers for the Secretary of State watch this show. I hope the Post-Gazette reporters and better, their managing editor, watch this show, because they're getting information that we've been asking for in a federal court case for months. And that isn't how the government's supposed to work.
Good stuff. Let's go to one other thing about the voters and non-citizens. What in God's name did the San Francisco Department of Elections do last week? This is somewhat incredible. No one seems to be real happy about it.
Yeah, pay attention. This is what a movement in the country. What they did last week is they are going to give the right to vote to aliens. Illegal aliens, legal aliens, let them vote in local elections. It's like if the City Council of Pittsburgh decided, hey, let's let non-citizens vote for Pittsburgh City Council. Right? Now, there's something special about citizenship. It means that we're all in this ship together, if you will, and we all vote for who the leaders are. Should be selecting American leaders. Not people from Mexico and Russia and England and Canada should not be electing city council members in Pittsburgh or San Francisco, because that's what makes us unique. Is we're citizens.
This is amazing. I mean, this basically said it was to start to allow non-U.S. citizens to vote in the city's school board elections, and to make a long story short, again, no one seems to be really happy about it. 71% of respondents in San Francisco said, what are you talking about? So
right. That's
as whack as it gets. All right. So you've heard the conversation, including with Dr. Thaw. It's everywhere about the cybersecurity. Another thing today with Facebook. We've heard Dan Coates, of course, reference the blinking red light. What do you make of, if you will, the continued meddling that is said to be occurring, what occurred in the past, but maybe more particularly what we should be expecting and how to protect it going forward from a security perspective?
Right. The best thing about our system is that it's decentralized. There's no single computer that you hack into to change the outcome of the elections in America. The founders of our country decentralized the whole election system, gave it to states, gave it to local governments, because decentralization promotes individual liberty. There's no king or monarch or tyrant that could take the system over. And that's the same is true with foreign influence. Because it's so decentralized, no votes were changed in the last election. No systems were hacked. The only thing they're talking about is essentially propaganda wars, which we've been dealing with for decades from Russia, right?
But you heard a prior guest. Maybe you have a divergent opinion on that. think, very eloquently pointed out that we've not seen it on the scale that we saw it then. Yeah, we've had this going back Cold War and other times, and disinformation and so forth. But the thing that this seemed to create was greater divisiveness and a effect on dialogue and ultimately protests looking to activate or deactivate one side or the other. I have to tell you, to the extent that any of that came apart or came down, I mean, the Russians are laughing at us.
Yeah. Let me agree and disagree ever so slightly. I don't think it's on a different scale. I think they had new tools. They had social media tools they never had before. But I guarantee you there was plenty of Soviet and Russian interest in the 72 election, the 1980 election, the 84 election. This is there was a long history that we know now from the declassified KGB files of Russian meddling in American elections. They just have new tools now, and tools that we're not totally comfortable yet with. The one tool they didn't have was getting into our election system. They didn't get into state voter rolls. They didn't get into vote tabulation. That didn't happen. What we're talking about happened is propaganda in the good old-fashioned sense.
Well, we'll have to figure out where it goes from here. And I have 30 seconds. Where does it go from here?
Look, I think people are finally hip to what's going on in elections. People are trying to manipulate the system, whether they live in America or whether they live in Moscow.
Good stuff. Please come back.
All right.
I mean, you know what? I love the passion. I love the information, the history, and so forth. It makes for wonderful conversation. And I'm sure we'll have debatable points, but this is certainly a great way to get started with Mr. Adams. And so we wish him luck getting back to where he's going. And remember, stealing the vote. How can people get this real quick?